We've lost over 50 corporate headquarters since I started Clayco 40 years ago. What was once a thriving community where I felt like I could build a business that could be a local business became a kind of a negative scene that caused Clayco to go far and wide to seek our work. So we traveled quite a bit. And it's been frustrating to me to watch this happen to our community. I have over 2,000 employees in the St. Louis and Missouri region. In the last few years, we made a big commitment to try to bring more of our jobs back to St. Louis, to the St. Louis region. We do have a large facility in Chicago, but we also have offices in the East and in California, Phoenix. We have a large presence there. I think it's been frustrating to watch what's happened to the St. Louis region, and I call it the city of lost opportunities. I think people have heard me say that before. All the way back at the turn of the century, we lost the railroads, went to Illinois, to Chicago, and pretty much ever since then, we've missed some of the big opportunities to really bring economic development to the communities. So it was with good intentions a couple of years ago that I went to the governor, to various political people around the state, and more importantly, I went to Ameren, who's our major utility on the eastern side of the state, to ask them why St. Louis couldn't attract more of this economic engine that is blowing up across the country. So we went to Ameren. We started working really closely with them. We've been meeting them monthly for the last 2 years. We've really studied the business, the industry, the transmission lines, the potential for major economic engine development of data centers in the community. And we found a handful of what I think are really great locations. When we started the process, the data center backlash, I would say, had not really started. So this has been a phenomenal thing to watch come together over the last probably 18 months. And it seems like each month it intensifies. With the fear of AI, some of the technology people coming out themselves and saying that it's going to have tremendous negative impact on white collar jobs, something whether you believe it or not, I'm more optimistic about than some of the naysayers are. I found our process of engaging with artificial intelligence and these new agents and engines have made us more productive. I haven't seen an opportunity yet to envision our company without a full parking lot. I think our parking lot will get more full over the next few years. So I'm really optimistic our company will grow, and maybe we won't grow employment at the same level, where our productivity is going to increase tremendously. So I'm more of an optimist about the technology itself, but I'm very aware of the negative backlash, the concern, legitimate concern about how data centers are going to impact communities, but also I'm highly aware of the economic engine that they create, which is really kind of mind shifting, particularly as suburban areas around the country have been really challenged economically. Even prosperous communities have been struggling with how they're going to meet their budgets and how they're going to keep their schools expanding and their fire departments and have the right level of security in their communities. And interestingly, in the places that we are working and building lots of data centers, there are lots of economic advantage coming to some of those communities. I think some of the backlash has been because of the general lack of transparency, which was the way that a lot of industry has built. Most of the car plants, most of the chemical factories, most of manufacturing jobs works under kind of an umbrella of confidentiality, particularly up until you get into the community approval process. So I think the transparency has to change. And I do understand communities really need to know what they're getting themselves into. I'm personally committed to a very transparent process. I think in the project I'm about to talk about, we were extremely transparent, and I'll get to that in a second. I think one really interesting thing is I've engaged with the data center coalition across America, and I'm working closely with the community engagement and communication departments of the large technology companies. I was on record having worked with Microsoft and AWS in the last 6 months on some of their communication efforts, that these companies have really stepped up to the plate to address some of the key issues. And it's going to be really important to remain competitive globally in the AI race. I don't think there's going to be any pullback. And I think data centers are going to have to be built in the United States is going to have to remain competitive. And there are constraints. Power is a giant constraint. Available land is a constraint. And now we're going to deal with this public outcry. And these questions are going to have to be answered. And they're going to have to be answered appropriately and through appropriate processes. So I really believe that the eastern region of Missouri, with the right setup, can benefit tremendously from the expansion of these data centers in our community. And I hope that we can answer the questions that the press has and the public has. And I think we're committed at Clayco and CRG to having a very open, transparent process and trying to answer every question. So I think the key issues with these data centers have been utility costs, water, noise, location, tax breaks, and jobs. I think one of the really important things that I believe is that there's an incredible amount of misinformation and that there hasn't been good, successful responses to this misinformation. But these misinformation campaigns have been extremely well organized and well funded. And quite frankly, I think there's some truth, kernels of truth in the process. But I think in general that these data centers are here to stay. The expansion is good for communities. It's good for jobs, and that every one of these questions can be answered. On the utility front, there's tremendous legislation occurring across the United States right now. And our team actually was at a meeting with the White House with President Trump, who did an executive order saying that the utility companies should make the data center and technology companies pay their fair share. But there's already been legislation in place, particularly in Missouri, which has addressed that the ratepayers, the residences, should not pay for the expansion of the utilities by the data center companies. In terms of the water use, which I think is a very legitimate question, particularly in some of the desert states that we work in Arizona, the technology companies were building data centers that were mostly evaporative cooling. Almost all of the technology companies have converted their projects to closed loop systems now and address the water concerns, at least for the most part, or work has to be done. And I think the technology is changing every day. We have our own engineers working on these systems. I think there's been accusations that the wastewater might have antifreeze in it and that sort of thing. And that is not true. There's no waste going out of any facility that we're building that's not as clean as the water that comes into the facilities. That's all being treated. So I think that question is answered. I think most of the backlash, this is really interesting because I've been in the room with probably 100 different people who started out as opponents in these projects. Most of these people haven't seen a data center. So one of the biggest things we've been able to do to turn the tide is get people to go look at data centers. We know some of the council people, we're going to get to Festus in a minute, from Festus went to see projects that they located on their own and came back a lot less alarmed than they were before they saw them. my own experience from building data centers all over the country is that these facilities look like industrial warehouse buildings that are full of servers and full of air conditioners, and that they're relatively harmless, other than they use a lot of energy, and that we have to address those questions. They're not noisy. I think they're, in a lot of cases, they're less noisy than the highways or the roads near them. They're a lot less noisy than industrial warehouse buildings and all the truck traffic. And they do have generators that have to be tested, usually in conjunction with a plan, the neighborhoods that are around them or the cities or the communities. So it's not like they just turn them on and turn them off without a plan. And I think that everybody's using their iPhones and everybody's using their iPad and everybody's using Facebook and technology, and it has to come from somewhere. I think in terms of the tax breaks, I think that's just simple math. I think each of these projects has to be weighed on its own economic weight to the community. In the case of Festus, the project will generate enormous additional new revenue, regardless of how you structure it. But we have committed to no tax abatement on that project. And I think all of the technology companies in their most recent published commitments have said that they're going to address all of these issues, and Microsoft in particular has said no new subsidies for their projects. And I think we're seeing a wave of a balance of less tax abatement, but the general economic benefit to communities like Festus is in the range of $40 million a year of new revenue. After all of the paperwork is said and done, that's an incredible boon to their economic livelihood for generations to come. So I just want to address two other things. Last week, we were served by a lawsuit by a citizen group that claimed various things in the lawsuit that are related to transparency and the Sunshine Law. I can tell you from my perspective that Clayco, under no circumstance, violated any laws, any rules, that we acted appropriately through the entire process. We were completely forthright, and that all of the meetings that we had were public meetings that where votes occurred. There was a 8-0 vote on the annexation, which was a public hearing. There was an 8-0 vote for the zoning, which was a public hearing. And there was a 6-2 vote to agree to our development agreement that was on March 30th, which was at a subsequent meeting where it was supposed to be approved on March 23rd, but they wanted the city council gave the public an additional meeting to give voice. And there was a lot of pros and cons to the project before that decision was made. It's my opinion that in that vote, we were granted vested rights to develop the data center, and that we have all the appropriate zoning now to proceed with the project. I also want to address that 4 opponents to data centers were elected last week, and I completely respect democracy, elections, and I congratulate all the council people who were elected last week, and I look forward to getting the opportunity to sit down with them, some of whom have already been willing to sit down to listen, to explain the project in more detail. We're still at the beginning of the project. Just because we have vested rights to develop the project, we still have a lot of work to do, and it will be probably at least 6 or 9 months before we're ready to actually break ground on the project. So the public and the new council are going to get lots of time and opportunity to ask questions, and we're going to listen to every single question, and we're going to try to answer every question, and we're going to try to prove the case that it's good for Festus to have this kind of economic development in their community. So with that, I think I'll just stop and maybe answer some questions.
Mr. Burke, referencing the lawsuit last week, let's forget the Fox 2. Referencing the lawsuit last week, an attorney for that group said the city could cancel this project at any time. Do you agree, or is there some kind of contract in place where this goes forward no matter who's on the council?
I don't think that they can cancel the project. I think our rights are vested. So I think that will be determined in the legal process. That's my opinion, is that we will aggressively defend our right to develop the project per the vested rights that we have in the development agreement.
But the vote also seemed to be a pretty clear expression of what the people of Festus want. You're addressing that election and the results of this, but I think a lot of people watching, like Drone Saunders, say, and not the legal argument or the financial argument, but the humans argument here. Why should the people of Festus have to accept something that their community has now publicly rejected in a ballot loss?
Well, we've been in over 50 meetings with the public, and I spent a tremendous amount of time in Festus. And I wouldn't say that this one election, while it absolutely is a demonstration by some people to elect officials who are opposed to the data center, I don't still think that they speak for the entire constituents, and I don't think the whole public understands the entire public benefit to their community. And so I think and hope that the newly elected council people will represent all of their constituents, not just the people who elected them recently, and that they'll listen to us and they'll understand the project better. I don't think most of them have seen what we haven't seen, which are plans for the project, because we haven't completed any plans for the project yet. So I think that's going to be a give and take process. And I hope they'll listen to us, and I believe they will.
Follow on transparency that you raised. I wonder if the extent to which you think that was a problem of CRG's own making. Some of the emails suggest that as early as November 7, 2025, the city administrator of Festus is emailing the executives at CRG about these briefings they were having at council members and saying that the Festus data center big cap was out of the bag. Seems to suggest that these reviews were being kept from the public in the early stages. Did CRG ever instruct city officials to avoid triggering the open meetings requires by holding city council briefings the risks of free?
I can't comment on that because I personally didn't have any communication like that. I don't think any communication like that happened. So that'll be determined by the outcome of the lawyers in litigation. I think we acted appropriately 100% of the time. I think it's not unusual for real estate developers or businesses when they're working and interacting with a community to have multiple meetings with council people. We invited council people to come to this facility to understand and to learn more about data centers, and we conducted over 50 public meetings, or some public and some small gatherings of meetings. So I think we acted transparently the entire process personally. So I don't think it was anything out of the ordinary, the process that we went through. And I think it's really notable also that the opposition held 2 meetings that were large gatherings, both of which we invited ourselves to, attended, and stayed for over an hour and answered questions. So to the question that we weren't present and we weren't answering questions, that's just not true.
Now that the project is approved, can you tell us which company is behind it? And it's not what you expect that would be public interview.
So we're still negotiating. We do not have a letter of intent or any kind of agreement with any of the specific hyperscalers. CRG is the entity that has the development rights, and we're negotiating in good faith with various hyperscale companies. And at the appropriate time, we'll work with the city to make sure that they're the right fits for the community and that it'll be the right economic outcome for everybody involved. But no, there is no specific hyperscale company that we're signed up with at this point.
And then for the Festus project specifically, that.
Exactly. Yes. And I'm speaking directly to the Justice Project.
Okay, so
We don't have a hyperscale data center company signed up.
Mr. Flood, what would you say to all these residents that just come out and spoken against the project whether they're concerned about their home values, accepted the issues you've addressed up there from water use to electric uses. What's your message to these folks who are so passionately opposed to this coming to their community?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people that are for it too. So, I mean, I think we have to listen to both sides of the story. We certainly have people who are opponent. I don't know if you saw any of the meetings. I thought there were some rational opponents to the project, and quite frankly, there was some irrational opponents. People were yelling and screaming, and I think behavior norms have really changed in America over the last few years, and it's gotten worse and worse. And I think every American citizen should be nervous and concerned about the way people are conducting themselves in these public meetings. And I think all I can say to every single one of them is that we're going to listen to every one of their concerns, no matter how loudly they yell it at us. And we're going to try to answer their questions rationally. And listen, I think when you look at some of the development of data centers across the United States, some of them have been built in inappropriate locations. I don't think a data center should be built 100 feet from somebody's home. When you look at some of the projects in Virginia, they're extremely close to people's homes. I don't think that's appropriate. And this project that we're proposing, and the site is up here on your left, we're going to be over 1,200 feet away from people's homes when all is said and done, and 1,200 feet is a long way from somebody's house. I think the other notable thing about the site in Festus, and the reason that we became so interested in the site, and I'll just take a second and point you to the site over here. It's obviously on a highway. It's on a loud highway that's being expanded as we speak. There's a tremendous construction project. There are industrial uses all along Highway 67 right now. I think what's really interesting about Festus, Arnold, Herculaneum, the whole area around there is it's a nice mix. It's not just a bedroom community where people are driving to St. Louis every day for jobs. They have an economic engine of their own. And I think the data center adds value to that economic engine to make your community a thriving suburban center, as opposed to just a bedroom community where people are driving back and forth. If you look on the left, you see a large transmission line. That's where that light green section is. That's why the site is attractive to us. It's on a highway. And if you notice on the right, there's a subdivision. Those are homes. I was in that subdivision yesterday. We've met with a lot of the people that live in that subdivision. That subdivision is on a giant hillside here. There's a large ridge that rises way above the rooftops of those homes. This entire ridge is to be protected. Every tree is to be protected. And essentially, the area of the development is this area from Highway 70 up into about level with this subdivision road right here coming across. And so when you look at the site in context, it's really hard to imagine how any of these people are going to be negatively impacted by the data center development. Most won't be able to see the project at all, and they won't be able to hear the project by ordinance.
Hi, my name is Jeffrey Bullard. I'm a reporter with KMOV, and you're mentioning is like Glenkey Courts, that neighborhood. So I've done a few stories with those families who live there, and they said that they've heard conversations at like some of the public meetings about possible buyout. Is that something that you guys have spoken to each of those households individually, like after at the residence, or contacted individually? Because they're saying that they've not had any official word from anyone at
That
that.
development agreement, I think, has a requirement that bones are within a certain distance. But I think we'd be willing to entertain talking to any of the neighbors if they're interested in selling their homes. I honestly don't think they'll want to sell their homes, because I think with the amount of jobs and economic activity that's going to happen in this community, my personal belief is the value of the homes is going to go up.
Bob, on the water, the development agreement that will sign allows CRG to drill its own wells if the city's water supply cannot keep up with facilities demands. One of the big case studies here, Oregon shows that data center water supply, so in elevated nitrate levels and are pumped out 8 times higher than the state's safety levels will allow. An aquifer under Festus doesn't stop at the property line or people that lives on that subdivision there. So I wonder what happens to the neighbors' wells if wars runs dry and runs dirt.
Well, that is a question I cannot answer. That is an engineering question, but I will get you an answer. But I would just say to you this, that we are committed to not having any degradation to the water service of anybody in the community. We won't build the project if we can't do it safely. Our commitment is to work diligently to conserve water use. We're going to build a closed water loop system. There are times in the heat of the summer for short periods of time where we may use more water than other times, that we're committed to not having any wastewater go in that's not as clean as the water that we bring in. And I personally don't think the water is going to be an overall issue, but every question will be answered in the community.
We had residents tell us that the proposed sites is a graveyard. That there's no graveyards. That's what you've been told, or
I haven't seen any grave sites on the property. It's not unusual to find grave sites on rural properties. Typically, if they're Indian burial sites, there's a process that you have to go through archaeologically to address it. You can remove them, but we haven't seen any actual grave sites on the site. If we do, we'll either work around them or we'll remove them per the typical appropriate process.
it improves the ozone to bring back the public support for this data center project for it to move forward? Is that on you? Is that on the elected officials that remain?
Ask the question again.
Who's the onus on to win back the public support for this project? Is it on you and Clayco? Is it on the Festus elected officials who?
Listen, I think it has to be a win-win for everybody. The onus is on us. Obviously, we're the ones that are developing the project, just like if we were going to build any other industrial project here, we're going to build a subdivision here. We're going to have to convince the community that it's good for their community. And you're not ever going to win every single person over 100% of the time. It's pretty interesting in my 4-year career how many times I've had tremendous opposition to projects, finished projects, and then had the same community that was opposed to the project embrace it. A great case in point is the Centene project. I don't know how many of you were around when that extremely controversial zoning process and entitlement process went through. I remember it really well. So I will tell you that the Centene buildings are beautiful and that the neighbors love the project now. It's an asset to the community. So
On that political question, do you expect other groups like trades or teachers unions who might stand me from the property tax removal to speak up and engage this issue? Could you use their support?
they have been very vocal. They were in every meeting.
You're engaged in the media base. Best it hasn't been their choices.
The reason I'm with the media today is because 2 big things happened last week. There was an election where 4 opponents, who, like I said, I congratulate, were elected. We have to address that head on. And there was this litigation, which came from a citizens group, and we're going to address that head on as well. So I don't feel overly defensive. I feel overly like I want this project to happen in the eastern region of Missouri because I don't want Missouri to be left off the map. I think in 10 years, it would be a terrific travesty for our community to turn back all of these data centers and watch all of this economic benefit happen in Kansas City, which it's happening right now, Ohio, Washington State, Oregon, which is a huge beneficiary, of the data center boom there. If you just look at the economics, the economic engine that this is creating for these communities, it would be a travesty for St. Louis to miss out on that. That's my opinion.
Mr. Clark, what in your opinion, having built dozens of these data centers across the country, what in your opinion is Jefferson County and the St. Louis region missing out on?
Well, for one thing, economic prosperity. How much different will Festus be when their budget is doubled? Their current budget is under $40 million a year. Once the data center starts operating, they'll have about $40 million a year of new revenue. The state benefits, the local economy benefits, but also this job will create thousands of construction jobs that'll last at least 4 or 5 years. Every single part of Festus will benefit. Pasta House will benefit. The local restaurants will benefit. The hotels will benefit. Vacancy rates will go down. Incremental pricing for all of those things will go up, and there will be prosperity. That's my personal opinion, and it's not just an opinion. If you go to the communities like Quincy, Washington, or some of the communities in Ohio, or even in Virginia, there's been a tremendous economic benefit to their communities that they recognize. And there's going to be the haves and there's going to be the have-nots, because this is going to be the new economy in the United States.
On the water, I wonder how you persuade the skeptics or people who are concerned about pollution of the water itself. The Trump administration has relaxed or delayed some of the PFA reporting requirements for several years. And the reporting that would be coming on in 2030 there is self-report. You be conducting your tests, you be submitting your own. I wonder.
Clayco is holding ourselves to the previous standards in every single environmental regulations. We're not taking advantage of any of the new Trump administration regulations. We're holding ourselves to the same standards before.
Holding yourselves. To who are you accountable to that regard? How do you persuade or how do you show people that the water is safe?
To my children.
What does that mean?
It means that we're going to hold ourselves to the higher standard, plain and simple. I don't know what you mean. You think we're just going to pollute the water and dust us? We're absolutely, we've committed that we're not going to. It's an engineering question, and we're going to answer the question. I just answered it. We're not going to put anything back in the waste water that's worse than the water we bring in. So that's the answer to the question.
But how do you convince the resident of that hear that, but they'll come off skeptical?
Well, I think we have to be as transparent as we need to be, and we have to have the testing and the testing agencies and follow all the regulations. The city and the counties and every place we're working in the United States, have methodologies for testing the water, the wastewater.
For this classic example of treating the glass of water yourself to prove. Did you see a demonstration like that happen?
It's possible.
Can you tell that no one appears there are plans for a second data center along Highway D down there? It was the meat property or CRG Dow farm. I've seen it referred to as. Can you comment on that at all? Would that be similar size, scale, serve the same purpose?
I think it's way far away from even beginning the process. So
You mentioned the issue of whether the Festus City Council and Bear revoke project agreement is something that might be litigated. But that aside, the opposition of the data centers are successful in recalling the 4 other members of the city council, recalling the mayor, holding a special election. At what point for a hyperscale tenant like Google and Microsoft, such a small risk and hardship if they're willing to deal with? I mean, how do you get that commitment from a company like that when that is hanging over as a real possibility?
these things take a life of their own, and sometimes they take years to develop. So I think we're going to go through the process. We're going to deal with the people, the elections, and we're in this for the long haul. And if the project is really an economic engine for the community, and enough people in the community see that, the project will happen. And if we don't win favor from enough people, the project won't happen. It still has a lot, we still have a lot of work to do to make the project a reality. What I'm saying today, right now, is we're totally committed to trying to see it through, and that we believe our rights are vested by the council that was elected by the people before. In a very public process, our project was approved, and we intend to aggressively pursue the project on this property.
You mentioned yelling, screaming, and the temperature of the opposition's raised. Do you have any security or safety concerns for people who work on that job site?
Unfortunately, we have seen some across the country. We've seen some violence. We've seen a higher number of threats than we've had in the past, and so yeah, we've had to provide more security than we have had to in the past. That's just the world we live in, sadly.
Here, Weston, you got a lot of,
Sorry,
Provide more security like at the
at the job sites.
Mr. Clark, from a conservative national security standpoint, America's in a technology race with China. The communities keep blocking the data center development, such as here at Festus. What happens to American AI capacity, military security, and our infrastructure, and our ability to keep globally?
I think it's a great question, and I think it's a tremendous concern that I have, that I share. I think that China is an adversary in every way, shape, and form. I think that's real, and I think they are building an enormous amount of energy, power plants. They're rebuilding their entire grid, and they are absolutely in the race to win it in the AI and quantum computing arena. And I think we cannot lose that. We cannot lose that battle.
Locally, how is
I think the patriotic question is a good one to be answered by these communities. I don't think it rises up to the level it should as a key issue in the local communities. Obviously, people are more concerned about their water and their home values and that sort of thing. All of those questions, I think, are asked and need to be answered on a continuous basis. But this question of national security is real. And I think people who are really in the know are very, very concerned that we cannot lose the AI race in America.
If you would get a do-over and start this project from the beginning again, what would you do differently that would generate more public support for these projects?
Well, first of all, we had great public support for the project. Our
As we saw last Tuesday, that support has certainly dwindled.
it's eroded, and so we're lucky to have our vested rights right now. Again, we're not going to barge into the community and build this data center if we can't win at least some of these new council people over. We're going to have to sit in a room. We're going to have to listen to their concerns, and we're not going to be bulls in a china closet. That's just not the way we operate. So I think we have to listen to their questions. We have to show them more details, and we have to find compromise.
That's my original question. What would you do differently if you could start this whole process over?
Well, hindsight is 2020. So I tell you, 6 months ago, we weren't here across the country. I think we're in the middle of this surge of opposition for these data centers. I think one thing I would do differently is I would have, if I known what I know now, I think we would have urged all the technology companies to be much more transparent and open in their public processes, which they're doing now. I think the technology companies are listening and they are responding. If you've seen Microsoft's 5 key pledges, I think that's a huge step in the right direction for technology companies. AWS is right there. I think you'll see all of the technology companies step up to the plate. I think the transparency process will be a lot different, but the projects are going to be controversial because, the cat is out of the bag on this misinformation, and it's really, really hard to change people's opinion when facts don't matter anymore. And there's definitely an era that we're in right now where facts don't always win the day.
One of the things that are constantly brought up at every single one of these meetings is a lack of transparency on how many jobs will actually be on site post completion.
I don't
How
think
cut the profit.
I don't think there's a lack of transparency about that. I think what we said and what we say in all of these projects is that the data centers themselves, and one data center doesn't equal all data centers. There's training buildings, there's inference buildings, there's cloud buildings, there's edge buildings, and they all have a different employment base. I think some of the AI buildings, the trainer buildings, actually employ a good number more people than the original cloud inference centers. They got a bad reputation for maybe only having 100 jobs instead of 1,000 jobs, but they're usually 100 very high paying jobs. I think the other thing that's hard to track and hard to explain is how much constant work is happening inside these facilities. There's constantly servers being changed. Those jobs are not counted. There's constant mechanical, there's constant upgrades in the electrical services in the building. So the reality is that these projects, when we see them completed, they're never really completed. There's always construction going on. There's always additions. There's always what they call energy harvesting happening. So the question comes down to like how many full-time jobs are going to be on this campus? And we have never claimed that that's going to be a huge number. What we've said is that the overall payroll that happens on the jobs that we're building right now is so significant that it overwhelms a typical manufacturing plant that might operate for 15 or 20 years. And that's just simple math, but it's a hard explanation.
Do you have an idea of what the total full-time positions would be for this particular development? I mean, you can obviously add on extra ones for the amount of time and trade work that would have to happen.
Yeah, I would say that once we identify a hyperscaler, we'll be able to make that commitment, but it would be between 100 and 200 absolute minimum high paying jobs that would be at the facility.
And for the construction going into this, I recall hearing residents concerned, is this going to be people coming from out of states, or is there a commitment to the local union shops to be a part of the development?
We don't anticipate with the labor market the way it is in St. Louis to be bringing anybody from out of state. And it'll be an all union job. Absolutely. All of our work in the St. Louis metropolitan area is 100% union. We enjoy a great relationship with them. If you take phase one on this project, you're talking about $6 billion development. Approximately $3 billion of that would be labor. That's a pretty intense amount of labor over a 3 or 4 year period. That's the number I talk about when you look at even a modern car manufacturing plant might not have that big of a payroll over a 15 or 20 year period. So the misnomer that these don't create jobs is wrong. That's my view.
You said groundbreaking 6 to 9 months away. Do you have a timeline for completion?
I think you would be online in 2028.
Is that visual online, or is that complete everything? Minus obviously the ongoing.
That would be the first phase, which would be approximately $6 billion investment.
Look, with the caveat to this question is unfounded as of yet, there is a lot of public concern around its general idea. And man, if a whole gymnasium of opposition could line up and yell at the town council and threaten was fired and open out, and they still vote for it, it raises the suspicion or concern that there must be some other motive. There must be like a kickback or some kind of under the table. We're going to see this from so many governors.
I'm not going to address that. No, that's a ridiculous question in my view. I hate to sound like Trump, but the accusation that there could be some untoward behavior is not an okay question. Unless you have some facts to back it up. I would just tell you this. The council voted for this. You should interview each of them. They voted for this because they listened. They went and saw data centers. They know what their economic future is for their community. They have families in the community. They voted for it because they believe it's in the best interest of their community.
Mr. Clark, I'm CRG, plan on engaging community
to educate them on the benefits of the data center, specifically at Festus?
The same way we have them, just open public meetings. We're willing to attend the opposition meetings as long as they're safe. And I think, it's going to be a continuous public process all the way till we break ground, and it's going to be transparent, straightforward, and open.
Said the show building within 1,200 feet of then a house. But is there going to have to be a security fence around the entire property?
They're always secure. They're always secured facilities. I mean, it's not like it's a typical, security fence, nothing exaggerated or anything. Like what I have here.
Do you want to address the meeting in downtown at St. Louis this week when Board of Public Service about potential data center coming to the Midtown area? And to what extent have you engaged the local officials at Switch project?
The Armory project at Midtown, I think our Board of Public Service is planning to resume those conversations this week.
I've stayed as far away from that project as I can. I'm not going to commit to always stay away from it, but I'm not engaged in it at this time.
Why do you say that?
I think the city of St. Louis has a lot of work to do to get themselves ready for economic development, serious economic development and turnaround. And there's more questions to answer in the city than what they should or shouldn't do about a data center. It is hard to imagine a city that has such economic hardship, not bending over backwards to try to figure out how to get an economic engine like a data center in their community. But I think they still have a bit of a dysfunctional charter, and they have a dysfunctional board of aldermen, which keeps us kind of out of the off the playing field.
You mentioned council members down in Festus visiting data centers. Would you be open to taking media into a data center? You could coordinate.
100%. Absolutely. And there's a lot of data centers that are pretty easy to see. But yeah, I think we could coordinate getting folks into the data centers.
You were talking, of course, about Eastern Missouri's potential for data center development. Are there a lot of sites in places like this where there's, readily available transmission, or, is that kind of picture limited by overall transmission bottlenecks of the grid competitive?
That's a good question. I would say there's not a tremendous number of sites, but like any large scale economic engine that you would bring to the community, whether it's a car plant or a battery plant or some other kind of manufacturing plant, Missouri has a limited number of sites in general because of the terrain. It's difficult to develop. This particular site has a lot of rock on it. So I think you have to take into consideration the whole myriad of issues when you're thinking about developing manufacturing or a data center plant. But I would say it's a very limited number on the eastern side. You got the floodplain. There are a lot of restrictions in the area that have cut manufacturing jobs out of the area in general.
You mentioned your engagement with Ameren at the start of this process. We saw Missouri pass Senate Bill 4 last year to expand energy production in its electricity grid. They're always talking about ramping up nuclear power.
Are we in a power race? And if not, as countries, should we be?
I think the country should be in a power race. And I think we should be not turning our back on any kind of power. I think wind, solar, gas. I think to the race with China in AI in general. And I think what's happening with these large language models, the expansion, the talk 6 months ago about the bubble in AI has mostly taken a back seat to the actual numbers of growth in cloud use and use of these AI models. So they use a lot of energy, and so there will absolutely be an energy race that I think will happen for the next 2 decades in the United States. I think that's a good thing for the United States. The United States in the last 20 years has seen a drop in overall electric use, and this has caused disinvestment. It has caused a lack of investment in the grid and transformers and in substations. And I think that this is going to be the economic engine that allows us to get our grid where it should be in the United States. Any other questions? I think that's a wrap. I'll be around for a little bit if anybody has any individual questions. Thanks.
Good job, bud. It's all right.
Proof. Things all over your floor. Take you got her.
It's so nice, bro. They got in.
Baba, Amber, I can't meet, bro. We got by now.